So is Warren Buffett right that the sky is going to be falling soon?
I don't think so. If you're an investor or you're on YouTube at all or an entrepreneur, you've seen that Warren Buffett is predicting that there's going to be a fallout in the real estate market similar to what happened in 2008. And we've looked into it, and I am not Warren Buffett. I would love to be Warren Buffett. But the short answer is we don't think any kind of tsunami is hitting northern Michigan. We're going to dive in today to 2023 data and what it's telling us about 2024 real estate market in general and in particular northern Michigan.
Correct, yeah. So a little bit of the same that has been happening in northern Michigan since COVID and a few different things. So Elisa, where would you like to take us on some of these numbers?
Well, let's start with what Warren has to say about what's happening in the economy. And the short version of a very long story is he's predicting that rising interest rates will put pressure that a lot of commercial real estate owners can't manage on, and that will lead to defaults, which will affect small banks, which will affect the economy and therefore affect the housing market. And
correct.
It makes a lot of sense. And we think that in northern Michigan, we think it's maybe a little overstated, for sure. There's going to be impacts. However, with economic pressures come lower interest rates, and therefore the root of the problem is addressed. And more importantly, we think our market is somewhat protected from the impacts. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and this is nothing new if you've sort of been in the real estate market or paying attention to it. It's been talked about for the last couple years that that a lot of these commercial loans are resetting here, and so some of this is going to be already baked in to the market. We are going to see probably some really big turnovers of properties going back to banks, certainly some smaller banks maybe being dramatically impacted. But overall, I think a lot of it is already probably been baked in a little bit to how the country, the market is going to, overall market's going to respond. And then two, we're here in northern Michigan, and it is a somewhat insulated from the rest. We're not a major metropolitan market. So let's take a look at what some of our local numbers are, what that might mean if you are a property owner, currently a property owner, or you're thinking about buying here in northern Michigan.
And so on the screen, we have displayed the results for 2023, and the best predictor of the future, of course, is the past. So we got to start there. Hot off the presses, we saw median sale prices, so the median price that homes are selling for in Emmett and Charlevoix County stay really strong. We had thought we were going to see a little bit of a fall this year and end up at a more normal rate around that 4 to 6% rate, and instead we saw 10%. So I think that's less than the 19% we saw the year before, but still really strong in terms of appreciation.
Oh yeah, for certain. And the other number that has been fairly consistent over the last several years, and that is the number of units being sold is consistently down. So when you look at, especially when you start looking at some of these numbers year over year, it really compounds to even a more significant number. And so yeah, units last year were down, ended up down 15%. Certainly if you get our luxury report or our annual report that we are sending out in the mail, and we'll have a digital version as well, that does break down certain segments of the market in certain areas in more detail. Right now we're just talking in very general terms, all different price ranges, waterfront, in town, all of that.
Yeah, and here's why we think that we're going to be protected from some of the economic impacts that we were just talking about, and that is new listing inventory. Even though the market slowed because of interest rates here locally last year, we still had strong buyer demand and we still had really low inventory. So new listings year over year, there were almost 1,300 in 2022, about 1,244 in 2023,
so
which is a
down.
4% decline. It's not the big declines we've been seeing, but it's still down.
Yeah, so unfortunately, getting towards, I think it's another video talking about when properties actually come on the market. It will bust that myth a little bit that there's listing season and not listing season. That's for another video, but we'll see as spring and summer develops. We'll certainly give a mid-year review, if not some monthly reviews. We'll see how that listing inventory changes. But right now it looks like 2024 is going to be another light inventory year. I don't really see, there's certainly not on a national level, people look at new construction starts. That does not apply to small markets throughout the country. That really just has no effect. But either way, there's not a lot of new construction starts. There's a few projects, but not much going on in Emmett and Charlevoix County. So it's not going to relieve the housing problem by, 200 new housing units coming on the market.
Right. And so what this all boils down to is we're still going to have a mismatch of supply and demand. So buyers have paused a little bit because of interest rates, but we're still talking to new buyers every single day that need to be in this market, that want to move up in the home that they're living in. And we're seeing continued lower demand, which means that the market still should be pretty stable in terms of price. We're not predicting price decreases this year. We don't have a crystal ball, but we think we're going to continue to see more stabilization, more on the order of somewhere between 5 and 10% appreciation rates.
Yep. So still a great opportunity for those looking to sell. I mean, prices are still quite high. Seen a lot of appreciation over the last 4 years, so the last decade, I could say. So still a great opportunity to sell, especially with that reduced inventory. So I think that means good things if you're still looking at selling. And however, if you're a buyer looking, maybe you're a seller and a buyer in Northern Michigan, we've got a fair number of those, or you're a buyer looking to get a second home, primary residence in Northern Michigan. We're seeing interest rates start to fall a little bit. Unfortunately, that's just going to be more buyers, more competition that you're going to be facing. So we're certainly supporting our buyers if they find the right home or even close to the right home, because we were just chatting earlier about we're still in this low inventory market. You can't hold out for the perfect home. If your goal is to be in Northern Michigan, you're going to have to unfortunately make some compromises. And so we're still pretty positive. I think that's going to be a long term. I don't see the inventory problem somehow changing in the next 5 years.
No, I agree. And just to hit on some of the other metrics quickly that are really important, of course, it's all about inventory, but that affects everything, right? So what are we seeing in terms of sold to list price? We're seeing the sold price come down relative to list price just a little bit. It's down 1% in the market, down to almost 97% from just over 98%. We're very fortunate in that we're above the average in the market here at Winslow Group. So we get about 4.1% more than the average realtor in the MLS, a percent to list price because of the professionalism that we bring in the photography and negotiations, et cetera, et cetera. Still, these are historically incredibly high sold to list ratios. Days on the market, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So 2 metrics there. The median was pretty similar to last year. I think it was down 2%. So the median was 46 days to 45 days. However, the average days on the market, which sometimes over a year it doesn't really get skewed, but if you look at a month, it can get skewed by 1 or 2 properties either way. But that was up 6%, so taking just a little bit longer for a home to sell from 69 days to 73 days. Still historically, and I've talked about this before, that it used to be in the early 2000s, 2010, it was 6+ months was the average days on the market for Northern Michigan. So we are still well below that, almost a third of what the average used to be. So homes are still selling relatively quickly.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. And we'll spend some time in a future conversation looking at the niche markets within our niche market. So taking a look at waterfront home sales, luxury home sales. We actually created a whole newsletter dedicated to this topic because it's really important to get pricing and marketing right regardless of your price point. It's absolutely critical within the luxury and the waterfront space. So it's something that we monitor very closely to make sure we put as much science and thought into pricing and marketing as we possibly can. And what we saw was, with the exception of Bay Harbor, which was flat, and Burt that was down just a little bit, there's a small enough number of sales on Burt that number you kind of take it with a grain of salt, right? But overall, waterfront is up just a little bit more than the average in the county is, which makes sense, right? It's rare, it's unique, and people are potentially have been waiting for the right property for years.
Yeah, sort of back to, I guess, what we started off talking about, Warren Buffett and some general fears about the economy, or I don't know if it's a fear, prediction or warnings that he was having, and maybe some people in the marketplace are having. Again, here in Northern Michigan, we are not predicting that at all. I think we're pretty bullish on the market here. I've talked about this before. I call it the sort of the COVID effect of, it's really sort of this change of thinking where people have decided, hey, life is short, it's meant to be enjoyed now instead of waiting a decade or 20 years for that waterfront home, that ski chalet, or that in-town home, or making that move from out west or down south up to Northern Michigan. We are seeing buyers do that now, and I would say that demand, that rationale, although work at the office has started to come back a little bit, that's probably slowed some of that desire or some of that feasibility for some people, but we're still seeing new families, new vacation home purchases. I just don't see that change.
I completely agree. It's a lifestyle change now. Maybe we stop talking about COVID and it's just like, it is the root cause, but what's carried it through is that people are changing in terms of the trade-offs that they're willing to make in life, and where they live is really important to them because more often than not, it's where they're playing as well, and it's where they're finding that enrichment. So we as a market have that in spades, so we expect it to continue to be strong. So to bring it all home, why is this important? First and foremost, to let you know that the sky is not falling, at least not in our opinions. We think that we're going to see more consistency and more stability. So again, going back to what that means for sellers and buyers, for buyers, if some of you are timing the market and waiting for prices to fall, we don't expect that great buying opportunity is going to come along. You need to adjust your expectations and work harder on your savings and talk to lenders and work with us to help you with your search. If you want to own a home, I think the time to do it is now. The other thing that I think that is really important, it's not just the sky is not falling, but it's around, it's still going back to the decision to buy or sell is always going to be around where you want to live and not what is going on in the market.
Exactly right, Elisa. Knowing data is still essential to be successful in this market, especially I would say on the sale side, but also on the buy side. You need to know these numbers. We spend a lot of time every month diving into these numbers, really looking and getting to know them, and then develop strategies for our buyers as well as our sellers around these statistics on how to best get them exactly where they want to be. So knowing the numbers can have a huge impact, and we're talking thousands and thousands, and depending on the price point, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars in your pocket, whether you're a buyer or you're a seller. So give us a call anytime, message us. We would love to go through more detail on these numbers, help guide you through the process. If you are just curious, we can certainly get you our newsletter. You can subscribe and like our videos on YouTube. And anything else, Elisa?
No, I think that just about covers it. I hope you found this helpful. If you want some help and guidance along the way, we are a phone call away, no matter how close you are to buying or selling. Thanks for tuning in.